There we go. Perfect. My favorite's the one about anti-gravity. That's pretty good. All right, it's good to see everybody here this morning. Once again, really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy schedule this week to come out here and put up with me and Jack. That's the way that I'll phrase it. So last night we just to kind of review for those who weren't here, we did a little role play. I role played as atheist, asked some questions, had a really good dialogue. If you want to see that, that's on Facebook Live. Jack recorded that. And then the second part of last night, we kind of looked at the trends that are going on across the world with regards to religion, and then we honed in more specifically here in our country, and noticed that those who have no religious affiliation, those who are moving into the categories of agnosticism or atheism, are on the rise, and kind of looked at what the church has done to kind of combat that, and what greater evangelical denominations have done to combat that. We noted that, for instance, 1 in 10 youth workers in the country have a conversation with their youth groups or do classes in their youth groups related to science and religion. We also noted that those who are one of the reasons why the categories of non-believers is growing is because young people are becoming more and more non-religious. That 36% of people who were born after 1996 are now either not religiously affiliated, agnostic, or atheist. And so we talked about last night, we've got to start training ourselves, training our leaders, training parents, and training young people for what they are going to experience. I also shared a brief story about a person who I know, a young person who I know who went off to college first semester and gave me a call one afternoon and said, "Hey, I'm really confused about Christianity and the Bible." And I noted that it wasn't the questions that were being asked that bothered me. I'd heard those questions before, but it was who was asking the questions. A young lady who was in the church her whole life, her parents were in the church her whole life, and so the answer that I came to is that while she was in the church her whole life and her parents were in the church her whole life, it didn't seem that either one of those two groups of people were prepared. So once again, this is just a primer for you. This is not the full course meal, so to speak. This is a primer for you. I hope that this stirs your ambition with regards to this subject, with regard to these subjects, and that this is a springboard for you to go out and buy and look at resources to help put that tool in your spiritual tool belt. So let me ask you a question real quick, and I'm not role playing. Who here believes that God created the universe? If you're here, I'm guessing every hand should go up, right? All right. So let me ask a question to the group. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that God created the universe?
The intelligence behind it is so superior that we're just trying to catch up to it.
Okay.
It's already been in place forever and ever and ever.
Okay. And this is something that you're going to hear me say as we interact together. Now, how do you know that?
Well, you know that because science and math support that it's all set up through structure and order and logic. It's not a universe of chaos, and mathematically things can be explained, scientifically things can be explained.
Okay, good. I like that answer, because guess what the number one answer is that I get? Anybody want to take a guess? Why do you believe that? Hey, the Bible said so. Hey, it's right there in Genesis chapter 1:1, right? And with regards to having a conversation amongst believers, that's a perfectly reasonable answer, right? But on the street, that may work, and it may, more likely than not, it's not going to work. Yes, sir?
One thing that we run against people, unbelievers, is we talk about science, and most of the time we don't have the skills even to grow fish.
Okay, so I think Daryl makes a good point. You know, we talk about science, but sometimes we don't have the skills necessary to kind of, handle that subject. And I think that's a good point. And I think maybe one of the reasons why we're hesitant to do that, it's kind of the same reason why we might be a little bit hesitant to do evangelism sometimes. Well, what if I don't know enough? Or what if I say something that, or what if I don't have the right answer right there on the spot? Well, this morning, for the next, however long we've got, next 30 to 45 minutes, what we're going to look at is we're going to just look at a general argument that can be made, not by going straight to Genesis 1:1, but what I like to do as I encounter people who are skeptics, what I like to do is I want to meet them where they are. Everybody here knows about Acts chapter 17, and that's kind of the basis of why we, or how we do what we do at Apologia, is that I want to know where that person is so that I can meet that person where they are, so that as we have a conversation, the truth of the Christian worldview and ultimately the gospel can change who they are. Because here's the thing, this is what usually happens. There's a skeptic on the other end, and then there's the Christian. The skeptic says, well, science says this. The Christian says, well, the Bible says this. Now, if that's the base foundation from where two people are coming from, how much progress is going to be made there? Robert's got it. Usually, goose egg. But what if I equipped myself that, hey, not that I know everything about quantum mechanics, not that I know everything about string theory, right? But what if I just knew enough to hold my own, so to speak, right? What if I could meet that person a little bit, even take a little piece of where they are and meet them where they are, so that the worldview of Christianity and ultimately the gospel could change who they are? That seems to be more appealing. That's exactly what happened with C.S. Lewis. Hopefully everybody knows here that C.S. Lewis wasn't always a Christian. C.S. Lewis was a skeptic, a big skeptic. And then Mr. Tolkien came along and had a series of conversations with C.S. Lewis. Lord of the Rings, that's the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings. And because of the arguments that Tolkien made, because he met Lewis where Lewis was, Lewis ultimately would go on to say, I could no longer, and I'm paraphrasing, he famously said, I railed against God because of the evil in the world, and then I had to ask myself, by what standard on my atheism do I even say that there's evil? And that was one of the arguments that convinced Lewis that God exists. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to look at, I've called it the Creator and the Cosmos, and we're going to look at some of the evidence for the existence of God on the basis of modern scientific discovery, okay? And so you have a sheet, if you have a packet, there's a sheet on the second page. That's kind of some of the questions that we're going to ask and some of the areas where you can take notes. If you have a notebook, go ahead and write in that notebook. But question number one on that sheet that we need to first talk about is, if God did not create the universe, how would that impact your Christian worldview? If God didn't create the universe, how does that impact Christianity or the Christian worldview? What'd you say? It negates it, right? In a really big way. Why? Because as we look in the text of Scripture, it says the very first words of the Bible are what? In the beginning, God did what? Created. Well, if He didn't, then there's something wrong. If He didn't, does He even exist? Well, God might exist in another religious, framework, but it wouldn't be Christianity. Go ahead.
Well, just like you did last night, you two both Cheryl and I occurred when you made your first observation. You don't care how it came into being.
Well, I had to.
As I was already set up, I know how I can respond to you, and when you did that, I go, well, that's so vague. Because you've either got to be one, you've got to at least, even as an atheist, you've got to explain at some level, how did this happen?
Yeah, no, that's true. Bertrand Russell, the famous atheist philosopher, they asked him about that, and he said, the universe is just there. It's just a brute fact, right? Doesn't need any explanation. So that's kind of what Bertrand Russell said. So let's get started. All right, hey, Psalm 19, 1 through 4. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies above proclaim his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. Their voice goes out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. But is that really true? Right? Is that really true? That's what we're going to look at. And so, like I said before, appealing to the Bible is not going to work for a skeptic. So what do? We meet them on their turf. And so and don't get, worried about that big word, cosmological argument. It's just simply saying argument from the origin of the universe. That's all that is. And that's what we're going to look at. All right, so this is how it breaks down. 1, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Simple enough, right? Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore what?
There's got to be a creator.
Hey, the universe has a cause. That's the basic argument. If you want to write that down somewhere, go ahead and do that. And so we're going to look at each one of these because this is a logically tight argument. And so what we need to do now is we need to show that the first 2 lines of reasoning are true, and then it would follow that number 3 is true. All right? So, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, you're not really going to get much pushback from a skeptic on this line of reasoning. It seems to be that something cannot come from nothing. One of the things I like to ask somebody and I've actually before had pushback on this one, and I just asked the person, hey, could you go grab 10 pounds of nothing and make me a sandwich? Right? Can't really do that. So if something can come into being from nothing, why doesn't anything or everything come into being from nothing, right? Why is nothing so discriminatory? Why is it just the universe? Right? I mean, I really would love to have, hint, wink, wink, hint, hint, a brand new Xbox. But there's a problem. Well, 2 problems. She hates it outside of Netflix for Nora, right? But number 2, it costs money. So why can't my Xbox just pop into being out of nothing, right? I love the number 100. But I've never seen a Benjamin just magically pop into my wallet out of nothing. That'd be really cool. And so that is a very good question. If the universe can just pop into existence out of nothing, why doesn't everything or anything do that? Why is that something that's not a regular occurrence that takes place? Kind of a couple of examples. Like I said, this seems to be intuitively true. Think about your daily life for a minute. Have you ever been at work worrying about coming home and a tiger popping into existence out of nothing and mauling you to death? Anybody ever worried about that at work? Nobody? Why is that? Because it doesn't happen. Because we know from our own experience that tigers just don't pop into existence out of nothing, right? Or even as we're here today, nobody's here worried right now that all of a sudden, a horse is going to appear out of nothing in your living room and you're worried about him urinating on your carpet and ruining your carpet for the rest of the year, right? Nobody's worried about that. I mean, think about that for a second. If that actually happened, would anybody ever leave their house? Nobody would be safe because something could pop into existence out of nothing and fall on you, right? And kill you, even in the safety and the confines of your house. But that doesn't happen. So I think that's a very good question to ask our skeptical friends. If the universe can pop into existence out of nothing, why doesn't anything and everything? And so the first line of reasoning seems to be true. Remember, nothing is always nothing. right? I don't know how that's looking on the slide there, but some scientists, sometimes some popular scientists, guys like Lawrence Krauss, say things like nothing is unstable. There are a variety of forms of nothing, or these quantum fluctuations apply something essential about the universe, that nothing always produces something if only for an instance. Now, that last quote is from a book by Lawrence Krauss, who's a world-renowned cosmologist. And his book is entitled A Universe from Nothing. Now, here's the thing. Nothing does not have any properties whatsoever, right? Nothing can't replicate. Nothing doesn't have the ability to metabolize. So what have they done? Let me ask you this question. What have they done to say something like what Krauss says there at the end? Nothing produces something if only for an instant. Yes, ma'am.
So if nothing is in existence, how can then it only be there for an instant?
It's a good question. Here's my question. How can nothing even be in existence?
Does he argue that it comes from a different realm, or is it an existence that we haven't found before, and all of a sudden it appeared? Or is this just out of nothing?
In Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, he argues that the universe could have popped into existence on the basis of what we see in what's called the quantum realm, the lowest form of energy in the universe. But what's wrong with that? Why? What's wrong with saying that that's nothing?
Energy is something.
Energy is something, right? So this is what has to happen. In order for guys like Krauss to get a universe from, quote, nothing, they have to redefine nothing, right? They have to redefine nothing to make it something. But then, that's not a universe from nothing, right? You see and what I always say is if I have to redefine what a word means in order for it to fit what I'm trying to show, then I've got the problem. Yes, sir?
So, do they have a pretty good argument or not?
Not if they're saying the universe is from nothing. Because nothing, I mean, it's just weird for me to say this, but like I said, nothing is always it literally means no thing. Brett.
Universal laws of physics apply around the world. You can actually figure out everything in the universe and to allow what God created. If that's not true, so much of the equations that we use in physics to explain how things move through space and so forth falls apart, because one of the very principles is matter cannot be created or destroyed. Mm-hmm. And with that said, we're going back to this nothing. You can go to space and people think, oh, space is nothing.
Yeah.
But even at that, they've proven that light has matter to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it will cause things to happen, because it's a force hitting something.
Yeah, no doubt. Even when you go and you open up like when your kids go to the refrigerator and they open it up and they say, there's nothing in here. There's something there. It's just not what they want, right? It's not food. It's not ice cream. So, they have to redefine the term. And even in Krauss's estimation, even when Krauss says something like the quantum fluctuation or the quantum realm, that still has to abide by what? Brett just mentioned it. The law of what? Laws and properties of physics, right? So it still has to abide by something.
They have to use terminology that is totally vague.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not understandable for the common person in order to just pull the wool over their eyes.
Yeah, no, I think that's something to be noted as well. So remember, nothing is always nothing. So this is what I want you to do. Next time you have a conversation with somebody and they say something to this effect, that the universe came into being from nothing, ask them what they mean by nothing. And if they say anything, what do? You say, that sounds like something. Right? That sounds like something. So first, first premise, seems to be true intuitively and scientifically, right? All right, so the second line of reasoning, the universe began, yes, sir?
Before you go on, another thing about science, everyone likes to be a scientist about that they try to deny God, but to me, science actually denies.
No, I agree.
But a good scientist will say that any experiment or any event is repeatable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're getting at with why doesn't a horse show up in my living room?
Yeah.
If this event happened once, why hasn't it happened over and over again? And why is it not repeatable?
No, I think that's a good point. Also, Brett. And here's the thing. And this is kind of the reason that I start with this one as well. I want you to see that there's a misconception in our culture that sometimes it's got to be science versus religion or science versus Christianity. But even as we meet the skeptic on their turf, what we see is that those two things are absolutely compatible. It's not either or. It's a both and, right? So the second premise is the universe began to exist. And so these are just some of the modern discoveries that we've had since the early 1900s that I think are really good evidences for there being a cause, a transcendent cause. Einstein's theory of general relativity, Friedman and Lemaitre predicted an prediction, Hubble's verification, and then in 2003, Borguth, Vilenkin, and then the second law of thermodynamics. So we're going to walk through some of these. So Mr. Einstein introduced his theory of general relativity in 1917. Now, he predicted that matter, time, and space were correlative, and so you can't have one without the other. And so that leads us, or led him to think that there was a beginning, or it shows that there's a beginning to the universe. But Einstein introduces this fudge factor, a cosmological constant, because his theory showed that the universe was either in the process of collapsing on itself or expanding. Now, the problem with that is that Einstein believed that the universe was static, was eternal. So he introduces this fudge factor to get what he wants. Now, you can speculate as to why he wanted a static, eternal universe and not one that was seemed to have a beginning. And so what Einstein does with this cosmological constant, who here, Mike, what do you teach? Social studies. Okay. Anybody here a math teacher? What's one of the taboos as far as division? You never divide by what? Zero. And that's exactly what the great Einstein did for his cosmological constant. He divided by zero to get what he wanted. So, Friedman and Lemaitre, a Russian and a Belgian, come along and they take Einstein's theory of general relativity using the equations from that, and they take out the fudge factor. They take out the cosmological constant, and they predict an expanding universe. And then Mr. Edwin Hubble. 1929, Hubble is at Mount Wilson. He looks through his telescope, and he notes that everywhere he looks in the distant galaxies on the light spectrum, things seem to be moving away, which causes that red shift. And so he says, hey, the equations that Friedman and Lemaitre have used for this prediction have now been verified. Now, what's really cool about this story is that in 1931, he invites Einstein out to Mount Wilson and says, hey, Al, look through this telescope, tell me what you see. And Einstein says, man, I see what you're seeing. I get what you're saying. And so what Einstein would go on to say is that that cosmological constant that he put into his equation was the biggest blunder of his professional career. I mean, how cool is that? Not that he made a blunder, but he later would go on to say, it's the biggest blunder of my career, and now I'm looking to discover the mind of God. Everything else is just, here nor there. Now, Einstein wasn't a Christian. Einstein wasn't a pantheist. We really don't know what Einstein was. Only Einstein knows what he knows. But notice, real quick question. How many quotes have I used from the Bible? Maybe in the presentation, one, right? But as far as looking at Friedman and Lemaitre, Einstein, Hubble, how many quotes have I used? Have I quoted Genesis 1 at all?
The cosmological argument had origins more in Aristotle than Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and was made more famous, later down the line by Islamic philosophers, and then in 1970s and 80s was made really famous by William Lane Craig. But this was, and what Hubble noted in, this is a common feature in all the galaxies. So Hubble had discovered and verified what Friedman and Lemaitre had predicted, which is groundbreaking. For the scientific community. So in 2003, Arvin Board, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, proposed that any universe that has on average had a cosmic expansion must have a beginning. What's interesting about this is that they introduced this paper during a presentation at Stephen Hawking's birthday. That was interesting. And so what you need to know, this guy right here, Alexander Vilenkin, he's agnostic. Now look what he says. It is said that argument is what convinces reasonable man, and proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past, eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Not a member of the Church of Christ. Russian agnostic. Saying, hey, on face value, given what we have, can't escape it. It's hard. They have to deal with that problem. And so I appreciate Alexander Vilenkin for being so honest with regards to what's going on. Yes, sir?
How are we going to remember all this?
That's why you have your packet. Do you have a packet? Okay. Are you copying notes? Okay, then there you go. And so another breakthrough. This is 2003 that this takes place. He notes this in his book. Hey, fly away. There you go. All right, so don't get messed up by the terminology there. Brett, what's thermodynamics?
Study of energy.
There you go, study of energy. So second law here states that the universe is running out of usable energy. In a closed system, things go crazy is like what I like to say. No, run out of usable energy. And so now here's the thing. There's a finite amount of energy in the universe. Now, if the skeptic wants to say that the universe has been around for forever, but there's a finite amount of energy, why hasn't it already run out of usable energy? Why are we even here? You see the difference there? Skeptic, universe is eternal, has always been around forever, no need for God. Second law of thermodynamics. There's only a certain amount of energy in the universe. The universe has been around for forever. How come we haven't run out of all of the energy yet? Does that make sense? We there? It means that there's a finite time in the past that the universe was created. That the universe came into being. All right, look at this analogy here. You see the balloon right there? It goes from what? Deflated to what? Inflated, right? Now picture that as kind of the universe. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. As Friedman and Lemaitre showed that there's this expansion that's going on in the universe. As air enters into the balloon, what happens? I'm not asking anything hard, right? Okay, as air enters the balloon, what happens to the balloon? It expands. And so as you take air out of the balloon, what happens? Okay, so as the universe expands, space, right? Galaxies, planets spread apart. Now, if we rewind the clock, what happens? All the way until there was nothing. So the question is, how do you get something from nothing if it's not a naturalistic cause? That's what we're going to look at in the next premise. Now, all right, we'll skip that for a second. The universe, actually, no, we need to go back to that. So, number 3, the universe has a cause. Now, because the first 2 lines of reasoning are true, it follows that the universe has a cause, right? So, what's the nature of this cause? Time, space, and matter are correlative. They came into existence by, all at the same time. Therefore, time, space, and matter can't create the universe, right? So, this means that the first cause must be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. Right? So the entity that caused the universe must be unimaginably powerful in order to create all that without any material cause. But also, since there was nothing there to kind of start the process in the beginning, there are no initial laws of physics, right? There are no initial conditions to get the universe off the ground. Hey, what could be the proper explanation for that? Well, there are only 2 options there, and that's abstract objects like numbers, like I said before. Numbers don't create anything. Like I said, I love the number 100. I would love if the number 100 would create a Benjamin and put it in my wallet, right? So abstract objects can't create anything. The only other option then is an unembodied mind. Now, when we look at that, look at what we have here. Timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, personal, makes a choice. What does that sound like? Timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, personal. Sounds like what? Deity. Really sounds like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right? And so what we see with regards to the origins of the universe is that the modern scientific discoveries point to not just a creation event, but a creator. Right? So let me ask this question that's on the packet here. And this is a question that you're going to get. You're going to run through this argument, and then what they're going to say is the following. Who created God? If God created the universe, who created God? Now, how would you answer that? Who created God? Now, this is how you answer that. One of the things that you say is, okay, well, what God are we talking about? If we're talking about Zeus, we can look at who created Zeus. If we're talking about Thor, we can look at who created Thor. But if we're talking about the God of Christianity, by definition, he hasn't been created. So what they've committed is what we call a category error. That what they've tried to do is they've tried to fit an uncreated being into a created category, right? So it'd be like this, right? What does the color green taste like? You see what I've done there? I've taken color, right, which is seen, and I've moved it into the category of something that is tasted, right? Or something like this. Raise your hand if you're a married bachelor. Category error, right? It's impossible to be a married bachelor. If you see one, raise your hand and get that person straight, right? Help them figure it out. So it's a category fallacy. You can't take that which is by definition uncreated and try and stuff it into a created category. So it's called it's called a categorical fallacy. And so we need to make sure that we bring that up. Okay, which God are we talking about? Are we talking about Zeus? Are we talking about Thor? Or are we talking about the God of Christianity? Because by definition, he's eternal. Yes, sir?
think the way you have to phrase that is that we're so, in the Gospels, or this way in the four Gospels, we're so wrapped up in our physical world, we try to put physical attributes to God. God's is spiritual, like physical. Therefore, he doesn't have mass, he doesn't have temperature, taste, whatever you want to say. He doesn't have those properties, so therefore he's not created.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Is like, hey, when you look at the properties of God, by definition, he has no physical attributes.
Aristotle called that the unmoved mover.
Yeah, the unmoved mover is what Aristotle and